Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the questions and the sources you send us and really try to unearth the most compelling insights. Today, we're looking into the Adriana Smith pregnancy case. It's a profoundly sensitive story, isn't it? And one that very quickly became a national conversation. You've sent in a lot of material, articles, legal analyses, news reports. Our goal today is really to distill the core facts, look at all the different perspectives, and understand the implications, big implications for medicine, law, and personal autonomy here in the U.S.
That's right. It started as, a private medical emergency, a tragedy, really, but it absolutely ballooned into this significant public controversy. It really puts a spotlight on these critical questions about existing laws and also the complexities of medical ethics. So in this deep dive, we'll try to map out the timeline, get into the legal arguments, and unpack the really wide range of reactions this case stirred up.
Okay, let's get into it then. Get ready for an in-depth exploration of the Adriana Smith case. So to really understand just how big this became, let's first nail down the sequence of events, the facts of Adriana's story. How did this all begin? What happened to her?
Okay, so Adriana Smith, she was a 30-year-old black nurse living in Atlanta, Georgia. Back in February 2025, she was 9 weeks pregnant, and she started experiencing these severe headaches. She went to Northside Hospital, was released, but then later, her boyfriend found her gasping for air. Just awful. And tragically, she was later declared brain dead at Emory University Hospital. The cause was blood clots in her brain.
That's just devastating, a complete medical tragedy. But then this is where things take that turn, right? The part that sparked all the controversy. What did the hospital decide about her care? And what reason did they give?
Right. So despite Adriana being brain dead, and this is crucial against her family's express wishes, the hospital decided not to remove life support. They kept her on it.
Against the family's wishes.
Yes. And the family reported the hospital's reason was Georgia's anti-abortion law, the one known as the Life Act. Their justification, as reported, was the detection of fetal cardiac activity, a heartbeat.
The Life Act threshold.
Exactly. Which, under that law, is a really significant point. Some interpret it as sort of the marker for legal personhood for the fetus. So the hospital's stated goal was to allow the fetus to develop enough for a potential delivery. They initially mentioned something like 32 weeks gestation, though they didn't release many public details about the fetal development itself.
I just can't imagine what the family was going through. Grieving, but also facing this huge ethical conflict and presumably massive costs, too. How did they respond?
Oh, absolutely. The financial burden was immense. Adriana's mother, April Newkirk, spoke out publicly about her distress and, yes, the mounting concerns over the cost of keeping her daughter on life support indefinitely. She started a GoFundMe, an online fundraiser. The goal was $250,000, and it gained traction really fast. Within just a week of setting it up in mid-May, it had already raised, I think, about $105,000.
And that GoFundMe, the public statements, that sounds like the point where this private agony became a very public issue. When did it really blow up nationally, internationally even?
Yeah, mid-May seems to be the turning point. The family shared Adriana's story with local news outlets first. From there, it just snowballed. National media picked it up, then international. It really transformed from a private family crisis into this major public debate. And that exposure, it led to groups on both sides of the abortion issue getting involved, fundraising for the family, publicizing the case from their own perspectives.
So this went on for months. What was the final outcome? For Adriana and for the baby, this was around mid-June.
Yes, mid-June. After being on life support for about 4 months, and actually shortly after her family had marked her 31st birthday, kind of bittersweetly, with some abortion rights groups present. The baby was delivered prematurely. It was via cesarean section, weighing just 1 pound 13 ounces.
So
very small, yes. And then the family announced that Adriana Smith would be taken off life support shortly after that delivery.
such a difficult end to a harrowing situation. So naturally, people started asking how this fits with Georgia law. Let's unpack that Life Act they mentioned. What is it exactly, and how did the hospital seem to think it applied here?
Okay, the Georgia Life Act. It was passed back in 2019, but didn't really go into effect until after the Dobbs decision in 2022 overturned Roe v. Wade. Essentially, it bans most abortions after about 6 weeks of gestation once cardiac activity is detected. There are exceptions, but they're narrow. Cases of incest or rape, but only if a police report has been filed. And this law, it wasn't entirely unknown. It had actually come up during the 2024 presidential race. Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate then, linked it to the deaths of two other Georgia women, Amber Thurman and Candy Miller, arguing they were preventable.
Right, I remember that. Okay, so the hospital cites this law. But here's a really key question. Did the state's top lawyer, the Attorney General, actually agree with the hospital's reading of the law in Adriana's specific case?
No, not at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. There was a Democratic state senator, Nabila Islam Parks, who wrote to the Republican state attorney general, Christopher Carr. She was seeking clarity, calling the situation inhumane. And Carr's office responded very clearly. They stated, and I'm quoting here loosely, "There is nothing in the Life Act that requires medical professionals to keep a woman on life support after brain death."
Nothing requires it.
Right. And they added, "Removing life support is not an action with the purpose to terminate a pregnancy." So legally distinct in their view.
But the hospital, Emory Healthcare, did they respond to that clarification from the Attorney General?
Interestingly, no. There was no public response from Emory Healthcare to that specific legal opinion from the AG's office.
That's quite a disconnect, isn't it? A state law, the hospital's interpretation, and the state's chief legal officer saying, no, that's not what the law requires. What did legal and bioethics experts make of this?
It is a significant disconnect, and experts definitely picked up on that. Mary Ziegler, she's a legal expert from UC Davis, noted exactly this gap. She said it's something we're seeing more often in the post-Roe landscape. Ziegler suggested that maybe the fetal personhood part of the Life Act could be making the hospital overly cautious.
Fetal personhood, meaning granting legal rights to the fetus.
Kind of. Once cardiac activity is detected, the law grants the fetus certain legal statuses. This might, perhaps inadvertently, create a perception of legal risk for the hospital if they stop treatment, even if the mother is brain dead and the law doesn't explicitly say they must continue. It's murky.
I see.
And bioethicists largely agreed the hospital probably wasn't legally required to continue. Thaddeus Pope and Lois Shepard, both prominent bioethicists, stated that stopping treatment in this situation wouldn't likely be considered an abortion under Georgia law. They also noted Georgia isn't one of those few states that do have specific laws prohibiting stopping treatment for pregnant women who are incapacitated.
So it sounds like a lot of ambiguity, maybe fear of legal blowback, even if the AG says it's okay, a sort of chilling effect on medical decisions. What other viewpoints came out?
Absolutely. That chilling effect seems plausible. Other experts weighed in too. Kimberly Mutcherson, a law professor at Rutgers, wrote an opinion piece arguing this kind of case was basically inevitable.
Inevitable why?
Because of how these laws are written by legislators, often without fully anticipating every complex medical scenario. That was her argument. And Stephen Ralston, he's a maternal fetal medicine director. He said these kinds of abortion regulations have really disrupted or broken a sort of long-held framework in how medicine operates. Then there was David S. Cohen, another law professor, who suggested the hospital's main worry might simply be those legal rights the law grants to fetuses. The potential for lawsuits down the line, perhaps.
Okay, so a lot of legal and ethical complexity. What about the political side? Were there disagreements there about whether the Life Act even applied to Adriana's situation?
Oh, yes. Definitely differing political takes. Ed Setzler, he's a Republican state senator and actually one of the sponsors of the Life Act.
Ah, so he helped write it.
Correct. He apparently supported the hospital's interpretation, the idea that the law did compel them to continue life support. But interestingly, the Republican-controlled Georgia House of Representatives took a different stance. They put out a statement saying the law was completely irrelevant to this specific case.
Completely irrelevant. That's strong.
Very strong. They called linking the law to the case just another gross mischaracterization by, quote, liberal media outlets and left-wing activists. And adding another layer, Cole Muzio, from the Frontline Policy Council, that's a conservative Christian group, he also agreed with the Attorney General, saying the law wasn't applicable here. So you see disagreement even within conservative circles.
Wow. So the law's own sponsor supported the hospital, but the State House GOP and a conservative group sided with the Democratic AG. That shows just how unclear this was.
Okay, stepping back from the pure legal and political arguments, what about the broader societal impact? How did people react? You mentioned different groups got involved.
Right. The Associated Press reported that the case really ignited concerns about racial equity, particularly among Black women activists. Monica Simpson, she leads Sister Song, which is a reproductive justice organization they were actually already suing over the Life Act.
Okay.
She described Adriana's situation as deeply problematic, highlighting the intersection of race and reproductive rights. She announced plans for a memorial altar, calling it Trust Black Women.
So a focus on racial justice there. What about the anti-abortion side?
They were active too. Students for Life, a prominent anti-abortion group, they announced they were going to fundraise $100,000 for the family's care, emphasizing their support for, preserving the life of the baby.
And you mentioned international reactions too. Yes, it definitely resonated outside the U.S. A British journalist, Zoe Beattie, wrote a piece calling Smith's case harrowing proof that the U.S. is living in the Handmaid's Tale. A very stark comparison, urging vigilance in the U.K. It shows how these cases can become global symbols.
It truly became a symbol, didn't it? A focal point for so many intense debates. Given all that impact, what happened next in terms of potential changes? Any legislative response in Georgia after the baby was born?
Yes, there was a move shortly after the birth in mid-June 2025. Nikema Williams, who is a Georgia House representative in the U.S. Congress, announced she was introducing a resolution. The resolution basically urges changes to legislation. The goal is to protect the rights, autonomy, and dignity of pregnant people, and it specifically emphasizes protecting Black women, directly referencing the racial equity concerns raised by Adriana's case. And she has co-sponsors. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and Sarah Jacobs are also backing it.
So, an attempt to clarify things legislatively at the federal level prompted by this case. Now, you mentioned earlier this wasn't the first time something like this has happened. Was Adriana's case unique, or does it fit into a pattern?
Sadly, it's not unique. There's a history here. The Associated Press highlighted several past instances. There was the case of Marlise Munoz in Texas back in 2014. She was also declared brain dead while pregnant and kept on life support for 2 months before a court ordered it stopped.
2 months? Wow.
Yes. And more recently, in 2023, a woman in Florida was declared brain dead at 22 weeks pregnant. Her baby was eventually delivered after several more went without care. And beyond those specific examples, there was a medical review article in 2021, co-authored by Vincenzo Berghella. They looked back and found 35 documented cases historically of women declared brain dead whose pregnancies were then extended artificially.
35 cases.
35. So while Adriana Smith's case got huge attention because of the current legal climate around abortion laws like the Life Act, the underlying dilemma isn't entirely new. These cases really underscore this ongoing, difficult tension, don't they, between advancing medical technology, what we can do, and laws or ethical guidelines that maybe haven't caught up. It leaves families and doctors in these incredibly agonizing situations, often without clear legal answers.
Yeah, connecting it to that bigger picture really shows how these aren't just isolated tragedies. They expose these deeper systemic issues in law and medicine. Well, the Adriana Smith case truly gives us a profound look at the unintended consequences legislation can have, and just how critical it is to get clarity on these legal and ethical lines in medical care. We've walked through the facts, the different legal readings, the really passionate reactions from all sides. It all just highlights this urgent need for clarity and, frankly, for compassion in these unbelievably tough circumstances.
It really does. And it leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty heavy question to think about, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As medicine keeps advancing, keeps pushing the boundaries of what's possible, how do we make sure our laws keep pace? How do we ensure they respect both life in all its forms and individual autonomy, especially when things get as complex and sensitive as they did in this case?
That is the crucial question. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope this exploration has given you a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of the Adriana Smith pregnancy case and all its wider implications. Until next time, keep digging deeper into the knowledge that truly matters.